All right, Kevin back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And today I am here with my friend Pham. Tan, welcome, man. So awesome to have you here.
Thanks, Kevin, for having me on the show.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, I'm going to tell a quick story because the way you and I, we have had one interaction together, but yet that one interaction was so powerful. And I'm just going to share really quickly because this whole podcast is about relationships and the value of relationships, and this will just be another powerful demonstration of valuable relationships because your friend and partner, Tim Francis, I got connected to Tim probably about a year and a half, 2 years ago through Tim and my's mutual friend, this gentleman, Eric Douay. And Eric knew that I was getting ready to plan a trip to Austin at that time. And he's like, "Oh, my friend Tim lives down there. I'm going to connect you with Tim. You guys should get together when you're down there because you guys would really hit it off." And so Eric connected Tim and I. When I came down for that seminar a year and a half ago, Tim and I did get together in person in an afternoon, just got together and just had a conversation for a couple hours. So when I was coming to Austin again just a couple weeks ago, a couple of months ago, I messaged him. I said, "Hey, I'm coming back down to Austin if you want to get together." And so we started talking, and he's like, "Kev, I'm going to host one of our dinner parties while you're here. If I did that, would you come to it?" And I'm like, "I would totally come to it." I didn't even know what it was all about, Tan. But I mean, anything that Tim's putting on that he's going to invite me to, I'm like, "I'm coming." And what it turned out to be was this absolutely amazing experience where you guys, and I didn't realize that you guys had done now, the one that I attended was the 45th one of these dinner parties that you guys have hosted. And every single one that you host is a different group of entrepreneurs. Nobody comes to the same to a dinner party again, other than like at the beginning to socialize. But so there was 8 entrepreneurs that you and Tim had invited. Am I right, Tan, in assuming that you invited 4 and Tim invited 4, or is it not? It's just I got that feeling just from what happened that night and the way you guys introduced everybody.
We typically try to split it in half where he gets 4 people, I get 4 people, but sometimes it's 5 or 3. Sometimes
Okay.
it's Tim doing the invites. Sometimes it's me doing all the invites. It's always
Gotcha.
different, but we try to split it as much as we
Okay.
can.
Well, I'll tell you, it was really evident that, well, for one, not only do you guys care deeply about hosting these events and care deeply about what takes place at these events, which is real connections being made between the people who you invite and stuff. And but I was like so impressed when you and Tim started introducing each person one by one, and you took turns. Each of you introduced 4 of the dinner guests, and I was just like, man, they have really done their research on the guests. They know the guests and just do such great introductions that by the time you guys were done, I'm sitting there going, I want to have conversations with everybody here and get to know them and stuff. And so, I want to thank you so much for that experience. I have already been talking about the experience and sharing it with other people saying, hey, if you ever get an invite to this thing, you really need to go. It's a great experience. And so thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Oh,
And
you're most welcome.
so what I'd like to do is I'd like to start by turning it over to you and just setting a little bit of context. So let's turn it over to you, and then so that you can share a little bit about, what do you do, who do you serve, what inspires you most about the work that you do, and we'll just start there, Tan.
Sure. So I dropped out of college and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And I was traveling through Asia for a little bit. And I started a website called asianefficiency.com, which was a blog all about productivity, efficiency. And I was just publicly documenting everything that I was learning from all the books I was reading, all the seminars I've been to, all the workshops I've taken over the years, because a lot of people have always asked me questions around how do you manage your to-do list? How do you stay up to date on everything? How do you manage your calendar? And I kept getting the same questions from friends and family members. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to put a blog together and just write the content for the questions that I get asked most often.
Mhm.
And then anytime I get the same question, I would just say, hey, you should go read this blog post, because I get that question very often. So again, my efficiency brain is just going off and going, how do I make things a little bit more efficient? And so I just started writing every single week, and I made a commitment to write a new blog post every single Tuesday and make sure it got published. And I did that for about a year and a half or so, and it started to get really popular outside of my friend circles and family circles. And so the New York Times picked it up back then.
Wow.
Lifehacker, which was a major publication, picked it up. Forbes picked it up. And so they said, hey, this blog, asianefficiency.com, is a great resource for time management and productivity. Go check it out. So I started to get a huge bump in eyeballs and traffic, and people started emailing me saying, hey, Tan, I really love your content. Like, is there anything that we can do in terms of working together, or like consulting or coaching, or do you teach anything? And I said, oh, no. This is just for fun. This is just a passion project of mine. I'm not here to make money with this. But I kept getting the same emails over and over and over again. And after about probably 130 emails, I went, you know what? This light bulb moment went off. You know what? I should really do something with this, because people are just begging to give me their money and I'm not doing anything with it. And so I was very fortunate to turn a passion project into a business that is still a business today for me, where I'm helping people every day with their productivity, their workflows, by offering online courses, whether they're live or pre-recorded, offsite training. I'm doing a lot of speaking as well. So for me, it's just a passion project for me to be able to share some of the things that I've learned about productivity and just being more efficient, and working with all these different clients and now teaching that to other people all over the world, and hopefully speeding up the process for them to achieve their goals or live their best life possible, and making sure that they do things that they truly enjoy and do less of what they hate and despise.
Yeah. You know, you mentioned a couple times that this is a passion project for you turned business, and you know, that's how I got into doing what I do. Is, you know, I mean, making connections for entrepreneurs and being this connector and facilitating $1 million relationships was like, I was doing it. I'm like, wouldn't it be cool if that was my thing, if that was my business, if that's what I did all the time? And the seed got planted probably 12 years ago. And I look at where we are now. It's like, yep, well, now it's reality. That's what I do. You know? And so, and you're right. You know, when we just love doing what we do, we just naturally want, not because we feel like we need to improve and get better. We just want to. We want to continue growing and stepping into becoming the best we can be at what we do and stuff. And that's kind of exactly what you just described. So kudos to you. And okay, so now that we've got a little bit of context set, I'm gonna reiterate the question for the benefit of the listeners. So, Tan, have you ever been introduced to a person or persons that completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And Tan, I'm just really excited to hear your story and your experience around this, and give you the opportunity to honor somebody or somebody's who's had such a profound impact on your life and on your business.
Oh, yeah. I would say there's probably two people that come to mind right away. So the first one, his name is Charles No, NGO. And I got introduced to him back in 2008, 2009. We actually met at a conference in Las Vegas. And this was a marketing conference. And I was working for a corporate company back then, being a marketing manager. And they said, hey, Tan, you need to go to this conference, learn about marketing, and come back and see what we can learn from this and apply to our business. And I said, okay, great. So I got introduced to Charles at this conference, and he was one of the speakers. And because he was one of the speakers, he got invited to all the cool parties. He got access to the private events. And he said, hey, you should come tag along with me, and we'll have a great time. So we ended up meeting each other after Vegas, like probably 10 times. in 10 different countries. So our friendship started off by seeing each other on different trips all over the world. And we ended up also being in the same country for a few years. Like we lived in Thailand together for a little bit, in Vietnam, in Eastern Europe a little bit as well.
Wow.
And so he and I have become such good friends that I was the best man at his wedding, but also
wow.
He has introduced me to so many books that I would normally never read, but because he's an avid reader, I don't have to ask for book recommendations anymore. I just get them sent to me every single week from a trustworthy source that I know, because he's kicking ass in life. He's doing really well in business. He's somebody that I admire and ask for business advice all the time. And so when you get a book recommendation from such a person, you don't question it anymore.
Yeah.
You just go, yes,
just
I'm going to read this.
Yeah.
Especially if he says, hey, I know you, this is something you need right now. Go read this book. Instant buy, don't even think about it. And it's on my bookshelf to be read right away. So that's Charles. And he's not a networker. He doesn't have a huge network at all, but he's such a valuable person to have in your corner because he's just so smart, has so much experience in business that, you know, whatever you're dealing with, whether it's firing a person for the first time, going through a lawsuit, you know, dealing with business partners, legal agreements, like this person has seen it all. And it's nice to be able to go up to that person and say, hey, what would you do? I need your counsel on this. So
yeah,
that's somebody I would like to honor. But the second person that you have brought up already is Tim Francis. So if I think about my current life, it wouldn't be where it is today without this person. And to give some context on the dinner party that you mentioned. So I actually got introduced to Tim by a friend that you probably already know, David Gonzalez, who lives here in Austin, Texas. And I live here in downtown Austin. And the way downtown Austin works, especially the city of Austin, is if you live downtown, most people come to the downtown area to have dinner, to go out, to have meetings. So if people know that you live downtown, they will always send you a message saying, hey, I'm in your area. Are you available? And so David just sent me a text message one day. He said, hey, I'm hosting this dinner tonight at Benji's on 6th Street. You should come. I think there's somebody there that you should meet. And I go, okay. I trust David. You know, David is a connector as well, as you know, knows everybody in digital marketing, and said, okay, I'm going to be there. I'll be there tonight. And typically I'm the type of person that has my days kind of planned ahead already, but I was fortunate to have nothing planned that evening. So I was able to go. And so I ended up going, and I sat next to this guy named Timothy Francis, or Tim Francis. And I had no idea who he was, but we sat next to each other and we ended up talking about Scrum out of all different things, like a project management philosophy of how teams are being run, how you create products, and how you develop stuff. And this is stuff that nobody was really talking about at the time. This is like 5-6 years ago. And so he and I nerded out about this topic. And then I found out that he's from Canada. And I told him, like, hey, I've actually never been to Canada. This is really fascinating. So by the end of dinner, he said, hey, Tan, if you ever like to come visit me, I'm happy to show you around. Like, I'll show you Banff, you know, beautiful nature, Lake Louise. And I showed me pictures of it and said, wow, like, this is really beautiful. Like, I would love to take you up on that offer. And so most people say that to be friendly. You say, hey, if you're ever in my neighborhood or in the city, just let me know. But I'm the type of person, if you tell me that, I will actually take you up on it. So 6 weeks later, after the dinner, I was in Canada.
I love that.
So I took action very quickly. We set it up. And what was funny was he actually made me take a personality test before I went, which was the Colby A personality test. And I was like, this is kind of weird. Why would you ask somebody to take a personality test when they come visit you, right? Like, are they going to kill you? Or are they trying to plot a plan? Like, what's going on here? But later do I find out that he's a Colby certified consultant. And once you understand somebody's personality, you can actually cater the trip to them in the best way possible. So for example, some people don't like surprises. Some people do. Some people like a lot of details so that they know what's coming up. Some people are just kind of go with the flow and they don't need any information. They just want to be there, right? So I'm the type of person that needs a lot of detail. And he was very aware of that. So he provided a lot of details as we're on the trip. And he would say at the start of the day, hey, Tan, here's the timeline of all the things we're going to do today. You know, at this time, we're going to do this. At that time, we're going to do that. And I felt like, oh, okay, this is great. Like, totally works with my flow. And so 5 days in, I realized that Tim was actually a client of mine. Tim actually bought one of my courses, but he also refunded the course. And this is something I realized later on is I remember processing his refund, but I didn't put two and two together that it was the same person. And so we became like best buddies since then. And when I came to Canada, he also hosted a dinner party. So he made me the guest of honor,
Okay.
and he invited other entrepreneurs at the dinner table. And I gave it like a 5-minute talk about entrepreneurship. And then we sat dinner and we kind of like got to know everybody at the table. And so fast forward maybe a year later or so, I convinced him to move to Austin, Texas, because he was considering moving to Vegas because he was flying so much, flying from Edmonton all across the states. And he said, Vegas makes the most sense because there's the most direct flights to everything. And I said, nobody wants to live in Vegas. You want to visit Vegas, but you don't want to live there. Where you want to live is in Austin, Texas. And so he ended up staying at my place while I was away to attend the ESPN Awards. And so he had an opportunity to check out Austin and really live like a local. He enjoyed it. He enjoyed it so much that he ended up staying in the same building where we live now. And so when I told him that he was going to move here, I said, remember that dinner party that we did up in Canada when you hosted me? And he said, yeah, I think we should do that when you move to Austin, because you're going to be new to the city and it'll be a great way for us to meet other people. Because I read a book called 30 Lessons for Living, maybe like a few weeks prior. And I don't know if you've read the book, but the basic premise of the book is that the author interviewed people who are about to die, and he asked them, what's one life lesson you would like to pass on to the next generation?
Wow.
And so a big theme of the book is, there's 30 lessons, but a big part of it is stuff like don't work so much because you end up missing out on, seeing your children, seeing your significant other, doing all the things you really want to do. But a big part of the theme of our happiness comes from our relationships with people. And so if you think about our podcast, $1 million relationships, it's great for business, for money, right? But also for our happiness. When we have great relationships with people, we tend to feel happier, but also we tend to live longer as well. There's a lot of research that backs it up, where when you have great relationships with your significant other, your family members, your community, the people that you work with, the people that live in your neighborhood, you tend to live longer, even though you might have bad lifestyle habits.
Sure.
And so it kind of made me realize, wow, like I know a lot of people by their first name, but I actually don't know them as people. Like I might see Kevin on the street and go, oh, that's Kevin. He connects entrepreneurs with other entrepreneurs. And I go, okay, that's Kevin, but I actually don't know you as a person. Right. And I said, wow, like I have a lot of shallow relationships in my life where I might know hundreds of people by name and what they do, but I actually don't know them. And I want to change that. Mm-hmm. So I said, what can I do to build more intimate, rich, meaningful relationships? And I said, you know what? I can have one-on-one dinners with people or one-on-one lunches or coffees. And that's a great way to get to know people, right? Or go for walks together or work out together. But then my efficiency brain went, well, if I have 400 people in my life, that's a lot of dinners. That's a lot of lunches. What can we do to speed this up? And that's when I thought, you know what? If I host a dinner where we have multiple people, I think we can get the same effect. But instead of having one person there, we might have 6, 7, or 8 people there and get the same effect. And I thought that is an efficient way of doing things. And so I knew I couldn't do this alone because I've never done dinner parties before. I've never hosted a dinner before. I've been to many dinners, but I've never hosted one myself. And Tim hosted dinners in Canada. And so I said, Tim, when you come here, let's host dinner parties together. I know a lot of people in town that I think you should meet, but also that I want to connect with on a more meaningful level. And I also know that you know a lot of people in the entrepreneurship world that live in Austin that you should meet, but also want to connect with. And let's combine the two.
Yeah.
And so that's what we did. And so we ended up hosting roughly 42 dinner parties in 2 years. And then the pandemic happened. So we kind of put a pause on that. And then in the last year and a half or so, we kind of picked it up very slowly again.
Okay.
And so we've had a lot of reps in. If you saw our first dinner, it was like literally 4 tabletops, and that was it. And, by the time you came, we had a beautiful dinner, beautiful plating, beautiful design. There was a flow to it, and we call it the Skyline Dinner Party because you get a beautiful view of the skyline of Austin. And we also curate it. So we want to invite people that we think you should meet as well, especially since you came from out of town. There were a lot of people who are in Austin that you don't know yet, but you should know.
Yeah.
And also that we wanted to meet as well. So it's a win-win-win for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and like I said, that was such an awesome experience. And like I said, it was really evident that you guys had been doing that for a while and iterating as you went, and had really landed on a flow and a process for hosting the dinner party. I mean, I even got a chuckle when you guys did the group photo, and Tim made the comment that we're going to do the group photo now because this is as nice as this dinner table is going to look, and we learned when to take the photo. And so that comes from experience right there, and so, but you're right, I mean, when you just, like you said, when you just want to contribute, you want to help, you want to serve, and you just attract people to you and stuff that are like, man, yeah, I want to come and experience that, and I want to come and connect with other like-minded entrepreneurs too. And so, yeah. So if you think about, I mean, we can talk about Charles or Tim, but if you think about Charles or Tim and the impact that has come as a result of your relationship with either Charles or Tim, what's the biggest thing that comes to mind that has come to pass as a result of your relationship with either one of these gentlemen that you absolutely know, hands down, would have never happened if you had not met Charles or Tim?
Yeah, I would say if I hadn't met Tim, I probably wouldn't be hosting any of the dinners that
Okay.
I've hosted. And so you and I would not be even here today, most likely.
Yeah.
And so most people, when they come to Austin now, they either know about Tim or myself, or they know somebody that will tell them like, hey, you should meet Tim or Tan. And that would have never happened many years ago if I hadn't met Tim. And so now when I live in Austin and go around the city, not that I'm like a local celebrity of some sorts, but I will always go out or run an errand and run into somebody that I know.
Yeah.
And it's a great community feeling of knowing that you live in this beautiful city and you get to know your people, you have relationships with people care about you. And there's been so many opportunities that I would just never be able to predict that would happen. So for example, I got to meet the director of a major airline. I can't say which one it is, but it is definitely based in the United States and starts with American. And I had a flight issue where I took a 5:30 a.m. flight. I had an appointment in Miami to go to the consulate for my passport. And I couldn't miss this appointment because I had to go to a wedding and I needed to renew my passport because my passport got stolen. So long story short, I needed a new passport, and my wedding the wedding of my best friend was a week after, and I couldn't basically miss this appointment. So the flight ended up being canceled while we're on the runway. And I go, oh my gosh, like I need to be at this consulate, like I can't miss this. So I literally call my friend at 5:30 in the morning. I said, hey, this flight just got canceled. There's a new flight going to Miami right now on another plane, but it's about to take off in 45 minutes. I can't get on that plane because everyone else in front of me is trying to get on the plane. Can you help me somehow? He said, let me see what I can do. So it's 5:30 in the morning. He's scrambling, trying to figure things out. He calls me back 2 minutes later. He says, you're at the top of the standby list. Go to this gate and they're going to call your name. You should be good to go. And lo and behold, I got called up. I was able to get on the plane, get my passport renewed, and then be at the wedding of my best friend. Wow. And that relationship would have never happened had I not met Tim or done any of these dinner parties. And I can count so many different examples that I would just never be able to, we would just run out of time simply for all the things that happen. So there's many things you can't predict when you have all these relationships with people, and there's all these opportunities that will come your way that you just can't manufacture from doing stuff on your own. Like, you need other people around you that care about you, that think about you, take you into consideration, because when you help them so much, they always want to contribute and reciprocate it as well. And then all this stuff comes your way that, you least expected, but could literally change your life.
Absolutely. I'll tell you, I mean, what I have long believed that, as entrepreneurs, relationships are the most valuable asset that we possess, and everything else stems from that. And what you just shared is such a great example of that. And, I just, really want to thank you for taking the time, Tan, to have this conversation today. And for anybody listening to this going, man, Kev, I sure do like that Tan guy. How can they find out more information about what you're doing? Any resources, any websites, anything like that, Tan?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So I have a website called asianefficiency.com. If you go there, you can subscribe to our newsletter where you get productivity tips and advice. And we have online courses and events where you can attend our workshops and just learn about different ways to become more productive and organized.
Okay.
And then I also have a podcast called The Productivity Show. It's the #1 productivity podcast in the world. We just surpassed 13 million downloads, which we're really excited about and happy about. And we release a new episode every single week, every Monday, every Wednesday, with actionable productivity tips that people can implement as well. So both resources are really valuable and for free. So go check that out.
Awesome. Well, Tan, once again, I want to thank you for taking the time to have this conversation. Really appreciate it. Any last thing you want to share before we call it a wrap?
Well, I'm glad you came to Austin, Texas, and we had dinner together. You and I sat next to each other, and I'm sure it's the beginning of many great things we're going to do together as well, and just like this podcast. And I think this podcast wouldn't have happened if you weren't at the dinner. And that's just an example of how powerful relationships are.
That's right.
When you foster the opportunities to create it. And so if there's anything I would encourage somebody to do is start hosting. It's not easy, but if you can do it, there's just infinite opportunities in front of you.
That's right. Well, Tan, once again, thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate you. And thanks.